Some part of me feels like I've made this video like 4 times already, but Demarcus Cousins is my best friend, so I figure we might as well talk about him. Boogie is really good at basketball. He has been for a while for the Sacramento Kings. He also yelled at Sauce Castillo in practice, and apparently that's the reason he was traded, if you do a quick Google search. And it's not surprising, because Demarcus, there are questions about his character, yelling at referees, getting technical fouls, letting his emotions get to the best of him sometimes, but he's still a hell of a player, and the team around him with the Kings is pretty booty. So there's the idea that they would have to trade him this season, not allow him to go into next season with an impending unrestricted free agency coming up. So we can talk about a couple of the teams that he could be moved to, and I guess I'll give my opinion on the whole thing, and hopefully we'll all learn something, or at least feel good about ourselves in the end. Now, a couple teams we have to get out of the way. Teams like the Brooklyn Nets, who are just so bad they should not even bother. A team like the Atlanta Hawks, they don't really have the trade pieces. Their guys are a little too old for Boogie. There's also young teams like the Los Angeles Lakers, who have a good thing going and really shouldn't mess up the chemistry. Same thing can be said for the Milwaukee Bucks and Giannis making a bid for one of the best players in the league. And then there are some teams that it just wouldn't really make sense. You know, why would you swap Hassan Whiteside for Boogie? You don't really change much. Andre Drummond for Demarcus. Again, kind of redundant moves. Same thing could be said for DeAndre Jordan with the Clippers. And then there's other teams who have stars that aren't necessarily centers, but it's still like, why would you do that? Jimmy Butler on the Bulls would make an example of that. So we got a bunch of teams out of the way. And there are a couple of teams who I think have a realistic bid for Demarcus Cousins. First one is his other best friend besides me in Washington, John Wall at the point guard spot. Holy hell, that was a ridiculous dunk. I didn't even know you could do dunks like that in 2K. The Wizards have kind of sucked this year. They've been better lately, and John Wall is definitely doing all he can to keep them afloat. Still one of the best playmakers in the league and overall point guards. He's also right up there with Brad Pitt for the best 2-syllable names. I mean, John Wall, Brad Pitt, those are some really good names there, so shout out to their parents. What the hell am I talking about? Bradley Beal would have to be the main piece in a trade for Demarcus Cousins because his fit with Wall has actually been pretty decent over the last couple of weeks, but, you know, if things are just not going well, the closer we get to the trade deadline, you add Kelly Oubre, another promising young player. He's shown some athleticism and just some overall promise. It's going to depend if he can really become a player or not. This could be the beginning of a move, and if Demarcus Cousins found his way in Washington, D.C., then the moment after he retired, we would have to give him the presidency of the United States. Also, there'd be a hell of a lot of things on Twitter of like Boogie for president, with like a picture of him going crazy, the White House behind it. It'd be a whole thing. So, there's a free one for you, Wizards marketing campaign. What the hell else am I talking about? Demarcus would add a new element to the Wizards' overall system. They haven't really had a post-up player to go next to John Wall, unless you count Nene, but, well, he's a good dude, but he's nowhere in the class of Demarcus Cousins. But at the same time, there are a couple of questions I would have with their system with Boogie. Because while I think the John Wall Demarcus pick and roll could be fantastic, I also fear about Wall's ability to play off of Boogie. Now, he has gotten better on his outside shot, but he's not a natural outside shooter, so there could be times when he's just not super effective from there. It could create an avenue of help defense for the other team. Speaking of defense, Marcus Thornton sucks at it, and he'd probably be your new 2-guard. And defensively overall, the Wizards have just not been good this year. Markieff Morris has had moments in the past of defense, but consistency seems to be the number one problem with him. I also question how he can play off of Boogie because he's not shooting well from anywhere this season, so he might not be the right power forward next to him. So basically, Demarcus would have to be pretty inspired on defense because he'd have to lift these guys up on that side of the floor. Luckily, when he's really going for it, Boogie can be a pretty damn good defensive player, which is what the Wizards do need. So hopefully it could be that, but the offensive capabilities are through the roof with Demarcus Cousins and John Wall. And having perhaps the 2 best players on the floor for a decent amount of the games they play, that'll make them tough to beat, but they definitely are vulnerable. I think Otto Porter could be a very good wing option as a shooter for them. But still, Marcus Thornton, Markieff Morris, not a perfect team around them, but I could see him going for it if things don't go north. And for the Sacramento Kings, I mean, it gives you a really good scorer in Bradley Beal, who is young, a little injury prone, but as of right now, he hasn't missed too many games this season, and as an athlete, a shooter, voice crack, I mean, he can average over 20 points a game for a damn long time. And he would also be subjected to the Sacramento Kings front office, and hopefully they wouldn't screw it up like they did with Demarcus, but regardless. And then hopefully Kelly Oubre would be able to get some more minutes for a team that is now embracing a youth movement. So there's one option, the Wizards. And now this one has been said 1,000,005 times on the internet, so I might as well make it 1,000,006. The Boston Celtics. Isaiah Thomas is a very good scorer, but he's not really that special player who can lead you to a championship. When you look at the list of teams that have won titles, Isaiah's just a step below. So he needs some more help, and the basketball nerd in me really wants to see Al Horford and DeMarcus Cousins next to each other, because I think they could play off of each other so well, because Horford's ability to shoot from pretty much everywhere on the floor and be a post-up option, not a consistent one every single third trip down the floor or whatever, but he can definitely score with his back to the basket at times, and just his overall savviness offensively, I think, would complement Boogie just so well. I've seen people talk about Marcus Smart being in the trade. If I was Sacramento, I would be asking for, one, the upcoming Brooklyn pick, of course, which will probably be a top 5 and potentially even top 2 or something, as well as Jaylen Brown, an athletic wing who can already zip up and down the floor as well as finish at the rim well, and his overall offensive polish is a bit better than at least I thought it was going to be this early on. You get him in Sacramento, probably trade Rudy Gay for something. One, it would allow him to show off more of that low post game, which is actually pretty decent this early in his career, and just give him more minutes overall. And Sacramento with him, as well as whoever they could draft with the Brooklyn pick, that would give you 2 really exciting young players to move into the future. And then on the other side of things, the Boston Celtics. One, he's wearing number 34, which of course should not happen. And okay, yeah, Paul Pierce is great. It's 2K, man. What was I talking about? DeMarcus would give them, hopefully, that special talent that could really lead them to a title. And it would put him in an environment of one that's more consistent, controlled, mature, with a lot of veterans around him, which would hopefully keep him in check. And then as far as the product on the floor is concerned, he's got a lot of shooters to kick out to, one of them being Avery Bradley, whose offensive game continues to improve. Again, Al Horford. Those two together just seems like such a perfect fit on both sides of the floor. And given the Celtics system requires a lot of ball movement and off-ball screens and stuff, it'd be pretty creative the ways that they could combine DeMarcus's offense with just the talent around him. There are a lot of guys who are complementary pieces, not really guys you want to run the offense through, other than Isaiah. There's good stuff. Now, would they be good enough to go up against the Cavaliers? I don't know. I think top to bottom, the Celtics would be, a hell of a team, but can you handle Kyrie Irving and LeBron James consistently hitting big shots in a late game where you're in Cleveland, the crowd's going crazy because Kyrie just nailed a shot over you, and now the Cavs are, up 2 points or whatever, and be able to just deal with that consistently and then be able to come back and do it to them. And I think part of that would just be from DeMarcus Cousins. Now, Boogie would have to make improvements, maybe not improvements, but just show that he can be a real defender. I mentioned before, he can play defense. Can he do it consistently? Is he ready to deal with Tristan Thompson being annoying on the boards? I don't know. I understand why you make the move because you want to win a championship while you have a good team around you, but DeMarcus would definitely have to show up against Cleveland. So I think those are the 2 main ones, the Wizards as well as the Celtics. I think some other teams are interesting. I think one of them would be the Toronto Raptors, actually, who have always had a hole at the power forward position, which Boogie is capable of playing, given that he's such a good shooter and can move around the floor pretty well. He doesn't have to play the center spot. And like the Celtics, the Raptors also have a pretty strong thing going on. And Valanciunas may have to end up being in the move, but I do think he and Boogie could play off of each other pretty decently. There could be some spacing issues. Now, the thing with the Raptors is I don't think they have any home run trades like Jaylen Brown and a first-round pick that's going to go top 5. But with Pascal Siakam and Corey Joseph, who's, a pretty damn good point guard who a lot of teams would like to have starting for them, as well as Jakob Poeltl, as well as some excess draft picks, they could get a 3-team trade going where the Kings would end up with just like 3 or 4 draft picks and a couple of these young guys on the Raptors, Norman Powell, and it might be enough for the Kings to say, okay, I don't think the Raptors could do a straight-up trade with the Kings, but if you get a third team involved using all of these interesting pieces, something could happen. And finally, the Denver Nuggets, I do think Nikola Jokic could be an option, given that he's a pretty exciting young center who has shown a lot of abilities as a post-up scorer, a mid-range shooter, as well as a passer. And if you swap Boogie for Jokic, you do get a nice, promising young player. I think Sacramento could also look for some of Denver's draft picks. There's also Emmanuel Mudiay, if you wanted to go for the full youth movement. However, the Nuggets are not a good team, and you still only have a year and a half to get Boogie to commit to you, and I do think you could surround him with some decent veteran talent to help you win right now, one of them being Wilson Chandler. But it is quite a risk. You trade away Nikola Jokic and Emmanuel Mudiay or whoever, and then you're just like a 500 team, and then Boogie decides to leave anyway. So that one would be a little bit more iffy. And I've also seen this one with the Indiana Pacers, which I don't agree with, but I feel like it's worth mentioning. Depending on who you're talking to, the Pacers have been a disappointment this season. Paul George is still very good. He's trying to do what he can, but the team around him, combination of not the best fit, as well as Monte Ellis not being good. I've seen some people suggest Miles Turner for Boogie. I understand it in the sense of like it would make you better right now, but Miles Turner seems like he can be quite a special player with his outside shot where he's shooting nearly 50% from mid as well as shooting well from 3. It would give the Kings the young talent that they would really be happy with, and it would kind of just be a younger version of Demarcus Cousins, to be honest with you, at the center position. And if we can hop back to the Pacers for a second, I think Boogie and Paul George together, that could be one of the best 1-2 punches in the NBA, and they could be very difficult to defend if you built an offense to where you had to try to stop both of them at the same time, and they would definitely have the 2 best players on the floor against the majority of NBA teams. However, Miles Turner being on his rookie contract means you have a lot of flexibility. If you take on DeMarcus Cousins, your salary jumps up. As a result, you can't make as many moves. It kind of locks you into place. I think they should just stick with Miles Turner, but I've seen it talked about, and it's an interesting discussion. But I think the 2 big ones for Boogie are the Washington Wizards and the Boston Celtics. The Toronto Raptors are interesting. They have a lot of young pieces. It's not a perfect fit with them and the Kings, but they could get creative. They have to trade Boogie this season, at least they should, and we'll see what happens.